Today's topic is another add-on from the Precision Locomotive Developments range, although this one came from the Bossman Games era, so she's been around longer than the GWR Hall and Grange packs, which I have covered in previous videos. This is the 5XP Class 460, also known as the Jubilee, from the London, Midland and Scottish Railway. But first, a brief history on the Jubilee. These engines were designed by William Stanier for express passenger services, and 191 examples were built between 1934 and 1936. The class got its name from locomotive number 5642, who, in 1935, permanently swapped identities with 5552, the class leader, and received the name Silver Jubilee in recognition of the Silver Jubilee of King George V. One thing that always intrigued me about this class was the naming convention. They were named after former Commonwealth states, countries of the British Empire, British naval commanders, or notable ships in the Royal Navy. As a couple of examples, here are 5595 Southern Rhodesia and 5715 Invincible. The latter reminds me of a Pat Benatar song, despite actually being named after a battle cruiser, and built 49 years before the song was recorded. Thinking back to 5595, her namesake country is now called Zimbabwe. The LMS gave these engines the power rating of 5XP, but this was changed to 6P, later 6P5F, under British Railways. Jubilees, or Jubs as they are sometimes nicknamed, had trouble steaming at first, but their performance improved after modifications to their blast pipe and chimney dimensions. They went on to have long and successful working lives, with all 191 examples surviving into British Railways ownership. While they often hauled express trains into and out of London St Pancras, they could also be found on other main lines throughout the London Midland region of BR. .45637 Windward Islands, formerly numbered as 5637, was the first of her class to be withdrawn, going in 1952 after being damaged beyond repair in the Harrow and Wealdstone disaster. 8 years later, in 1960, standard withdrawals began with 45609 Gilbert and Ellice Islands, which I often get confused with 45606 Falkland Islands, and the final Jubs were withdrawn by 1967. Fortunately, 4 members of the class have survived into preservation. I wish that 5570 New Zealand had been one of the survivors, but that's just me. On a personal note, I was lucky to see 2 of the preserved Jubilees when I went to the Severn Valley Railway in April 2025. The locomotives in question were 45596 Bahamas and 45699 Galatea, although the latter was disguised as 45627 Sierra Leone. Unsurprisingly, I would have preferred to see her disguised as 45570 New Zealand. In any case, I initially saw Galatea at Kidderminster, and got to have a look on the footplate and all. Then later in the day, I saw her again at Highley and rode behind her for the return trip to Kidderminster. I've also got a 00 scale model of 5563 Australia in LMS Crimson Lake, which I acquired long before seeing any Jubilees in real life. PLD released his Jubilee pack in November 2018, and it's available from either his own website or Steam. I acquired my copy from his website, where the full price is £13, but I paid £9 and 9p, or around 20 New Zealand dollars, for my copy because it was 30% off during PLD's Valentine's sale in February 2026. There's an awful lot of features in this pack, and I'll start it by saying that I'm happy to see that all 191 members of the class are included. A full list of numbers and names can be found in the add-ons manual, but unfortunately, the nameplates are not 3D. As for the included liveries, there are 6 of them, and the list is as follows. LMS Black and Chrome, which was only worn by 5552 Silver Jubilee. LMS Crimson Lake, my personal favourite of the group. LMS Post-War Black. LMS Experimental Blue. British Railways Aligned Black. And British Railways Lined Green. Both BR liveries have either the early crest or late crest. I should add that the LMS Post-War Black and Experimental Blue liveries are not available in the Jubilee pack that you can get from Steam, as they are exclusive to the PLD website. Besides 5570 New Zealand, 2 other members of the class that stick out to me are 5690 Leander and 5725 Repulse. If you know, you know. Meanwhile, this pack includes the Stanya tender, in both welded or riveted variants, as well as the Fowler tender, which I always thought looked a little bit odd behind a Stanya engine. In any case, the Fowler tender is available in all the included liveries except LMS Black and Chrome and Experimental Blue. Speaking of Experimental Blue, this was apparently only worn by 5573 Newfoundland, and only very briefly at that. Something I remember from reading a book about the rebuilt Royal Scots was the fact that 2 Jubilees, 5735 Comet and 5736 Phoenix, were also rebuilt with the Type 2A boiler. Unfortunately, the rebuilt Jubilees are not included in the TS Classic add-on. Regarding the Jubilee's textures, I think they were good for their time, but PLD has significantly improved in this field in the years since 2018. For another comparison, here is the LMS Crimson Lake livery as it appears on Jubilee number 5636 Uganda versus Patriot number 5551 The Unknown Warrior, the latter being from Caledonia Works. As for other features on the PLD Jubilee, these include, but are not limited to, realistic physics, realistic steam chest simulation, vacuum brake ejectors, gauge glass blowdown, whatever that means, gauge vibrations at speed, as opposed to good vibrations, fluctuating water level depending on the route gradient, performance mode, which is toggled with Control-Shift-P, an automatic fireman, which is toggled with Control-R, customizable lamp arrangement, see the manual for the right keyboard controls, and a small selection of headboards, which you can cycle through by pressing H, then going back with Shift-H. The Jubilees are resource-intensive locomotives, and can have a pretty severe impact on your frame rates depending on how many of them you've placed in the scenario. The Grange and Hall have much better optimization by comparison. As for what the Jubilee is like to drive, I certainly wouldn't consider her an entry-level locomotive, as she has more advanced controls than, say for instance, the LNER Peppercorn A2 model that Dovetail released on Steam in May 2015. As discussed in previous videos, PLD locomotives can come across as daunting at first, and I should add that they're not fully compatible with the F4 heads-up display, but you'll likely get the hang of it with enough practice. The manuals always have a full list of the controls, keyboard inputs, and advice on how to drive these locomotives. One thing that I consider especially noteworthy is the fact that, Once you've opened the regulator past 50% on PLD engines, you have to press Shift A to slam it open all the way, then use Shift D to slam it shut, otherwise the regulator will not shut properly. I haven't seen this sort of thing on any other third-party developers' locomotives. Out of curiosity, I thought I'd do an endurance test, of sorts, over the Stainmore route, going from Barnard Castle to Kirkby Stephen East with 5570 New Zealand, and on this occasion she had 7 lucky 7 coaches in tow. These are the LMS Period 3 coaches that come with the Princess Royal pack from Caledonia Works. As for how 5570 performed on this run over Stainmore, she had a decent start, and got up to 34 miles per hour by the time she reached the Tees Viaduct. There's a 1 in 70, later 1 in 67, uphill grade soon after the viaduct, and the locomotive initially did better at maintaining speed than I was expecting, but then came the challenge of trying to keep up the boiler pressure and water level while not losing too much speed on the steep grade. Maintaining the fire mass at, or above, the ideal level is crucial for the locomotive to steam anywhere near well. Between Lartington and Hewlands, I was down to below 10 miles per hour, and tried shoveling coal above the ideal fire mass to see if that would improve things. It wasn't until I was around half a mile from Hewlands when the locomotive started accelerating again, although the acceleration was very slow because I was still on a 1 in 69, nice, and the boiler pressure was down to around 150 psi at this point. The gradient briefly eases out to 1 in 244 just beyond the station, but steepens to 1 in 82 not much further up the line. By the time 5570 got to the next station, Bowes, she was doing 22.5 miles per hour, but her boiler pressure still hadn't gone past 160 psi again. After Bowes, the gradient levels off for a while before increasing to 1 in 154, later 1 in 64, and it doesn't level off again until the summit. Throughout the journey, I found that neither the steam nor water injectors were particularly effective when the regulator was open, and I didn't want to leave it closed for too long, otherwise I'd lose what little speed I still had. 5570 plodded along at no faster than 28 miles per hour before finally reaching Stainmore summit. The whole time, I honestly forgot about the water trimming valves, so I dare say I'll need to practice driving on this engine again. Considering how low the water level and boiler pressure got, I'm surprised that I still made it over Stainmore without stopping, and with 7 coaches in tow. In closing, and to be honest, I have mixed thoughts on the LMS Jubilee from Precision Locomotive Developments. To be fair, it is decent for an add-on this old, but in saying that, I would like to see her updated with the same level of features, and better optimization, as newer PLD products. In other words, an update similar to what was applied to the GWR Castle. As a brief aside, and to be honest again, there was a point where I was wondering if trying to finish this video was more trouble than it's worth, as the Jubilee was testing my patience for various reasons. But to be fair, she doesn't test my patience as much as the New Zealand Railway's JA and KB locomotives. Your mileage may vary, but personally, I found the Jubilee harder to drive than the Hall and Grange, and I haven't used simple mode on those Great Western engines. Even so, the LMS machine is still a welcome improvement on the tired old RSC era Jubilee model, but I would only recommend her if you're confident in your ability to drive more advanced locomotives. I can't say I'm entirely confident myself. As for where I'd rate the BMG/PLD Jubilee, I honestly can't make a solid decision on that front. To end the video on a positive note, I'm still happy to finally be able to run 5570 New Zealand in TS Classic. And if you've stuck around to the end of the video, you win a heritage railway in Gloucestershire that was endorsed by a popular singer. It's the Olivia Dean Forest Railway.